Well, survival. Is that really what this tree is for? I mean, it used to be for security breach, but now it's kind of like... And besides the skills that nobody's figured out to this day, let's just for now take a look at the skills from the survival tree and figure out what they really do so that you can decide whether or not they're worth it for your playstyle. So let's get right into this, starting from the bottom and working our way up to the endgame perks to see if it's actually worth it to go that far. And the first thing on our list is the effects of Agile Croucher. And I don't think this perk is too bad. It's about a 15% increase in how fast you crouch walk, which can be substantial. However, using the slow walk is about 25% faster without putting any points in, and from what I know is just as quiet. So I usually just prefer to walk unless I'm stealthing around arc or trying to keep my silhouette hidden. Next, Revitalizing Squat surprised me, because I saw that somebody had tested that it didn't work while moving. And even though it doesn't really seem like it does, it still gives you around a 20% increase to stamina regeneration when in the crouched state. And you know, for a second, I was about to convince myself that this perk was actually worth it because of that. And then I tested it again and found that just standing still regularly ends up recovering your stamina faster than if you were maxed out with this perk. So honestly, I don't see any worth to this perk, even though you can still technically get the 20% buff while crouch walking. Which I guess is kind of a dub for calming stroll enjoyers. Thank goodness the next perk actually does something, which is in-round crafting. This perk gives you a few exclusive to in-game crafting recipes, which I've literally never crafted, but that doesn't matter because you get to craft bandages, stamina stims, and shield recharges on the fly, including a couple grenades that are both pretty useful. And to me, I just don't understand why some people avoid this perk at all. It's right at the beginning of the survival tree, only needs one perk point to get the full benefits, and just opens your gameplay options so much while you're in raid, like being able to refill on bandages after taking fall damage, or to throw some extra plastic and chemicals at some arc you don't like. And of course, some people say you could just bring it all into raid at the first place, but crafting just feels right. At least up next is a skill that I think most people know is good, right? Well, if you didn't know, I tested it this week, and it turns out it's about a 30% increase to looting speed, which basically means that for every 3 items you search, you get another search for free, which is good. There are just so many reasons why looting faster is good, and it's definitely made this perk an absolute must pick. Next is Silent Scavenger. And going into this video, I really wanted to know what this perk did. So me and my friend went through a lot of tests to see the ins and out of what this perk actually does, starting with hearing distance. We found that in different locations, the results were different, but by testing it in the same spot, we found that maxing the perk brings the distance you can be heard down from around 55 meters to 50 in line of sight. We also found that was the case when there's a wall obstructing you. However, where this perk actually makes a difference is the sound that you make while looting. As you can tell, it's a lot less noticeable of a sound. However, taking things out of a container didn't seem affected by the skill. When it comes to looting a building, the sound that you make without Silent Scav is very noticeable compared to if you have it maxed out. So that testing took forever. Thank goodness the next 2 perks are pretty easy to cover, being Good as New and Suffer in Silence. Now, starting off with Good as New, this perk is situationally alright. When under a healing effect, you get a 20% increase to stamina regen. This is applied to whatever rate of stamina regen you currently have, so if you're just standing still versus jogging, you will see more of the effects. And I mean, you can use fabric to get 25 seconds of this 20% increase, but you have to be out of your way to damage yourself and do this, so I could do without it. And that means we get to talk about Suffer in Silence, which means we don't talk about Suffer in Silence because it does nothing. It does nothing to the groaning that you hear, which is what I thought it did. a sound which people can't even hear from over 5 meters away. And if this perk feasibly did anything, it just barely makes your footsteps quieter when you're hurt. But it's not at all enough to make a difference. Unfortunately, you need this perk if you want some of the best perks in the game, so let's just get into those. Moving right into Broad Shoulders, which thankfully is straightforward. Every level that you put into this perk will give you 2 extra weight capacity, which means once you max it out, you get a total of 10. I usually feel the difference after only putting in a couple points, but I usually max this out anyway because I just hate being over-encumbered. And since we're talking about being over-encumbered, here's Stubborn Mule, which marks our return to the complicated perks. Because immediately, something unrelated to the perk was screwing with me. For some reason, you can hold 3 pounds over the weight limit before you actually become overburdened. Can somebody, tell me in the comments what this actually means, because I couldn't figure this out. Anyway, testing this had 3 results. The first being that if you're just barely over-encumbered, there is no difference when maxed out. I did also test this while jogging, but it was the same case and it takes like a whole minute, so let's just move on to being 20 weight over the capacity. This might be the most realistic case which you see this perk in action, because this is sort of that middle ground where you pick up a couple extra guns or a whole bunch of materials and you find yourself just sort of barely holding too much. So seeing that it's about 17 to 18% can actually be helpful. The effects here were still kind of negligible, but if you're really trying to carry a lot out to extract, then it can help you when you're traversing, even when you're moving, because it does apply. I do think more interestingly was the effects once you get to the crazy levels of over-encumbered. Here I'm carrying 40 more than I should be, and when I'm standing still, I'm barely restoring stamina at all without the perk. But maxed out, you kind of can actually still regenerate stamina, so I guess that's a case. Speaking of regenerating stamina, here's 3 deep breaths. Fuck! After testing this perk, I actually kind of like it. It basically lets you do actions again faster if you ever run out of stamina. That being from dodge rolling, running, sliding, or climbing. Not only is it pretty versatile, but it also applies about a 50% increase in recovery time. However, keep in mind that doesn't actually affect how fast you regenerate stamina, it's just how fast you can do another regular, unslowed down action without it being exhausted, like dodge rolling, for example. Wait, I forgot. For some reason, it lets you do 2 melee swings when you're fully out of stamina if you're standing completely still. Anyway, do with that what you will, but let's move on to the next skill, which is Traveling Tinkerer. I don't really use these, but the utility traps that you get are pretty useful for area denial if you don't have a mine blueprint, and it allows you to craft them out of raid too. However, most people tend to get this perk just to be able to craft raider hatch keys in raid. But can I quickly point out that herbal bandages only take some fabric and a great melon that you can find on basically every map. I just like this perk. It opens a whole new level of the game that you can't experience without it, and apparently you can get really creative with it. And speaking of creativity, one raider scraps is definitely something, but whatever it actually is, I can't figure out. Yes, I know it says that it spawns raider crafted items in raider containers, which by the way should mean not only caches, but backpacks, ammo boxes, med bags, that sort of thing. But after searching, how much? 40 containers with the perk maxed out, I'd either find nothing that was raider crafted, or maybe an extra light impact grenade, bandage, or smoke. I think one time I also got a shield recharger, but that was in a med bag, and I don't know if those just spawned there. I did feel like I saw more quote-unquote scraps when I was doing my testing with raider caches, but I know those already spawn raider crafted items, so it's kind of hard to tell. In all, it just doesn't seem worth it to put 5 points into a perk that saves maybe a couple cloth, plastic, and chemicals. And to note, I've never seen something spawn in a container that was already looted. Like, that would be pretty cool, right? Because, you know, it's a raider scrap. As we come to the end of the survival tree, Looter's Luck kind of carries being like one of the best perks in the game. I'm not going to drag this out. If you put 5 levels into this perk, every time you search an item, it has a 50% chance to just reveal 2, which is just so good. To put that into perspective, in this clip I actually searched 7 items in the same time I searched 5. And if you're lucky, it can be faster. And with that, we finally made it to the last 2 perks. And just to troll, because it's my video, we're doing Minesweeper first. Guys, wait, let me test. Leave that mine, leave the mine. This perk lets you steal traps, apparently including trigger grenades that have been thrown. But when it comes to disarming anything, it makes a loud wrenching sound. And to get anywhere close to a mine, you need to both crouch and slow walk up to it, which means you move at a snail's pace. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Wait. Then, apparently anybody can do this to a mine, whether you have the skill or not. Doing a crab walk lets you pass by any mine that's on the ground. So the only thing that Minesweeper does is let you disarm them. Maybe if wire traps were used more, this perk would have more use, but right now you can just shoot or sneak around mines. So, Security breach. I hadn't opened one of these since they made them randomly spawn. And now I've opened 50. So the real question is it still worth it? Well, during my testing, I have to admit I found more security breaches than I thought I would. However, a lot of the time the loot was pretty mid. The only thing you'd reliably see was gun parts and ammo, and sometimes you'd get a gun. But that usually just means green guns. I only found like 3 blue ones. And whenever something purple spawned, it was usually just complex gun parts. Here's a sample of the loot I got after about 15 raids. And I will say, only a few times I found security breaches that were looted by someone else first. So they're all for you if you want it. However, I think that wraps up our video. And this video looks like this. I literally can't make this up. It actually just, I was gonna fake it, but it just crashed. So thank you, and please, if this video helped, share it, like, comment, and sub. It means a ton to me. Did you see that? That was cool, right? Oh, it didn't work that time! Oh!